So today I'm going to talk about Henry VIII's six wives. It's a bit of a summary of each individual one because it's really interesting and it's one of the most famous pieces of English history. So yeah. Well, the first thing is, why did Henry have six wives? Why wasn't one wife enough? Well, he had this overwhelming desire to have a male heir, a son, and someone to carry on the Tudor dynasty. He did run out of wives as he went along. For example, he would divorce or rather annul the marriage of two, behead two, and would have remained married to the third one, but she died at childbirth, and then the last one survived him. Actually, two of the wives lived longer than him, Anne of Cleves and Catherine Parr. Catherine Parr died in 1548, Anne of Cleves died in 1557. So, yeah, how bad could a marriage be if a woman is said to have survived it? Well, first let's start with Catherine of Paragon. She was born in 1485, got married to Henry in 1509, and died in 1536. Well, she was at first engaged and actually married to Prince Arthur, Henry's brother. They got married in 1501, and this was his whole plan of Henry VII to forge an alliance between Spain and England. So that was a good idea to marry the future king of England with the princess in Spain. So she would arrive in England in 1501 and get married, and they got married on the 14th of November with a dowry of 200,000 crowns. So quite a huge dowry. Also, it is said she tried to take chickens with her on the trip because she was afraid England would not have chickens, and she actually never returned to Spain. When she left in 1501, she would never return. And however, they got married. She stayed in England, but 6 months after the marriage, Prince Arthur died. Now, Henry VII, you could argue he was a bit of a miser king. I have a video on that. Well, you could say that. So he didn't want to give the dowry back, and he also didn't want to lose the Spanish alliance. So he thought, hey, I have another son who is now going to be the heir to England. Why don't I marry the widow? Because she was kept in Spain. And Henry. Good idea, right? So they were betrothed. Henry obviously saw a papal dispensation and managed to get it. Basically, after Catherine had sworn that her marriage, even though it was supposed to be consummated on the first night, on the wedding night, it never was, because she was just 16 years old, and I know by 16 in those times it's completely different to 16 now, but still, at 16 years old, a girl who barely speaks English has to get married to this guy. I can understand that they never consummated the marriage. So at first, when they were friendly and everything, and Catherine had been in England for a long time. So when they got married in 1509, it was actually mutual love, and they actually had a really close relationship. And she was actually really good at managing stuff in England. She was key in the First French War, when the Scots tried to attack England in the Battle of Flodden, and she managed to organize the troops to go up there, and they won, killing the Scottish king. So Catherine was a good queen. She knew what she was doing. And however, by 1518, she was now 33. She was also older than Henry. She had 6 pregnancies in 9 years, but only 2 survived. That would be, one of them would be Princess Mary in 1516, who would go on to be Queen Mary I, Bloody Mary. Henry actually had a son in 1511, which was great news because only 2 years into the marriage, 2 years into the the reign, and he already had a son. He held this huge tournament celebrating the birth of the heir. But not 2 months later, Henry died. So Henry the child, not the king. So there was proof that Catherine could provide a living child. However, could she provide a son? That was the question. So in 1525, then the whole King's Great Matter arose. So he's like, hey, hang on a second. Was the marriage between Catherine and Arthur ever consummated? Because if so, God is judging me for this and he's not letting me have a son. And actually this he based it on the text from Leviticus in the Bible. And I actually mentioned this in my video on religion under Henry VIII. Well, that's Catherine of Aragon. There's like a bit more, but that's when the marriage actually kind of ends, because from 1525 onwards, Henry doesn't pay that much attention to Catherine. By this point, he has had so many mistresses, including one Mary Boleyn. But he would go on to meet one of Catherine's ladies in waiting, Anne Boleyn. So Anne Boleyn, she was born in 1501. So she was 16. She was born when Catherine was getting married to Arthur. She got married to Henry in 1533 and died in 1536. So Catherine of Aragon, she was divorced. Actually, the marriage was annulled. It wasn't a divorce, but then Anne Boleyn executed. Well, she was quick-witted and had actually lived in French court for like 7 years and returned to England in 1522, where she would serve as Catherine's lady-in-waiting. And she was there at court for like 4 years until around 1526. There was a hint of romance. It was like, will they, won't they? Well, by 1526, like I said, Henry began courting Anne. He had, his Anne's sister, Mary, was his mistress for a while. But by 1526, he became infatuated with Anne herself. However, Anne was smart. She's like, oh, you want me to be your mistress? Oh no, I'm not gonna do that. The only way I'm gonna sleep with you is if you make me queen. Henry's like, I can't do that. I'm married. She's like, hey, well, that's not my problem now, is it? So she managed to manipulate him in a way. And then by 1532, I was like, hey, oh well, and basically fell to his advances and got pregnant by December 1532. I said this before, but she was pregnant, and Henry like, I can't have a child born out of wedlock. It's bad enough that I conceived the child out of wedlock. Hopefully he would be born like when I'm married to her. So the matter of marriage became like even more urgent. So he actually married Anne Boleyn by like end of January 1533. The Pope just kept on refusing the annulment, and Henry's like, oh, you're gonna refuse the annulment? No worries, it's fine. I'm gonna do it myself. So on the 23rd of May, well, not himself, but, on the 23rd of May, he instructed Archbishop Cranmer, who, by the way, is yet another Thomas. It's like Thomas Wolsey, Thomas More, Thomas Cromwell, Thomas Cranmer. Stop with the Thomases. Well, Archbishop Cranmer, he got Cranmer to give him the annulment. So Henry's like, okay, fine. I am now married to Anne Boleyn, and at one point he was married to both. And I am not longer married to Catherine of Aragon. I can actually crown Anne, and he crowned her on the 1st of June. It was like, and by this point she was still pregnant, and he was convinced the child was going to be a male heir. he said, okay, she definitely hasn't slept with my brother because he died when she was just 1 year old, and it's definitely a son in there. Yes. Well, the child would go on to be Queen Elizabeth I. She was born in September 1533. So obviously Henry would not be impressed. And Anne Boleyn, she would be terrified because she knew what had happened to Catherine. So she became desperate. I need to give him a male heir. And she kept on trying. She suffered by January 1536. I keep on saying 19. By January 1536, she suffered for at least 2 miscarriages. And actually the second one was a boy. So she actually had a boy but lost him she had a miscarriage. So there was some rumors of her infidelity emerged, and it's debated as to what extent these were actual rumors, she had been caught being with adultery and stuff. But there's also rumors that people who opposed the Boleyn faction in the court they wanted her gone, so by spreading these rumors, they would get to do this. Henry heard of these, obviously, and told Thomas Cromwell, his chief minister at the time, and I quote, "If it turns out that your report, which I do not wish to believe isn't true, you'll receive pain of death in place of the accused." Now, what this meant is that Henry actually sent Cromwell to investigate. He's like, "Hey Cromwell, you're going to go look to see if there's signs of adultery and incest or whatever. And if I don't like what I hear, and if it's not true." So, Cromwell found evidence of adultery and incest and conspiring to kill Henry. He presented it to Henry. It was really well done because obviously Henry didn't find a fault in that and said, "Oh well." Anyway, and actually sent Anne Boleyn to be executed with a special sword brought in from France. So she was given the privilege of choosing of dying not by an axe but by a sword. And actually, fun fact before I move on from Anne Boleyn, when Catherine of Aragon died in 1536, months before Anne did, she actually wore yellow to the funeral. So I was like, she had no respect for Catherine. None. Then came Jane Seymour, who was actually born in 1508, 1 year before Henry came to the throne, 1 year before Henry was married to Catherine of Aragon. They got married in 1536. Fun fact, hours after Anne's death. Hours. I'm not saying no. Hours. Talk about getting over someone fast. And she actually died in 1537. Actually, no. I was going to say it's the shortest out of all of Henry's marriages. It's not. It's actually not. Well, Jane was actually Anne's lady-in-waiting. So there's kind of a pattern. Henry's wives tend to be one of the current wives' ladies-in-waiting. So if you wanted to marry the king, which I don't know why you would have to get into the queen's ladies-in-waiting circle, and you would have a chance because you would be at court all the time, and Henry would see you, and he could become infatuated with you. But you had to be careful. You couldn't just be a mistress. You had to be queen. And that's how Anne Boleyn played it. Well, when they got married, and Jane got pregnant, and when she got pregnant, literally everything she wanted, he gave it to her. He's like, "You're gonna give me my boy. I'm gonna give you everything you want. Are you uncomfortable? I'm gonna make you more comfortable." He actually brought in some eggs from France just because she wanted eggs. So she actually had a baby boy, Edward, who would go on to be Edward VI, in October 1537. However, because of complications after childbirth, she died 12 days later. So that was not good for Henry. Henry was really devastated because, he finally had a male heir, which ended up surviving, but he lost his wife. And when he actually died in 1547, he's actually buried with her. Which, fun fact, it's not a fun fact, it's more of an observation. I think that if only Jane Seymour had lived, he wouldn't be buried with her, because the only reason I think he became so like, oh my god, Jane Seymour, she was the best one, was because she died right after giving him an heir, a male heir. So he's like, oh, she's the best thing that ever happened to me, because she didn't have time to screw things up. Like, who knows? And even the child, Edward was a sickly boy. He had illnesses all his life. Died really early on at age 15. But I mean, obviously Henry didn't get to see that. And Henry was so devastated by her death that he actually waited 2 years to get married. Well, a bit more. And this was to Anne of Cleves. Anne of Cleves was born in 1515. So when Henry was already married to Catherine of Aragon. They actually got married in 1540, and she would go on to die in 1557. She outlived Henry. This is the shortest of the marriages of Henry, because they got married in January 1540. Their marriage got annulled in July 1540. So, I mean, the relationship wasn't good. Well, Anne of Cleves, she wasn't a lady in waiting to Jane Seymour. She was actually a German princess who her portrait had been done by Hans Holbein and transported to England. And when Henry saw it, he was like, oh my gosh, she's beautiful. She's handsome, demure looking woman. But upon meeting her, he literally said, I like her not. I like her not. No. Actually described her as a horse. I can't imagine the face of the poor woman, but to be described as a horse, that can't be good. Well, the way they met, it was really weird. He actually dressed up in servant's clothing to see if she would identify who the king was, to be her one true love, right? Well, Anne, I was actually supposed to know about this, and she was supposed to go in, look around the servants, and find the king. However, no one told her. She didn't speak English, and no one really told her that she had to do this. So he was there. He was like hiding behind some curtains, and then he came out and actually went in to kiss her. But Anne went like, hell no, like, who are you? Why are you like a servant trying to kiss me? And Henry got really offended because like, hey, I'm King Henry. You're gonna respect me. I'm gonna be your husband. This was all organized by Thomas Cromwell, by the way. No. Kind of organized by Thomas Cromwell, but he died in 1539. So no, he fell in 1539, he died in 1540. But this was kind of arranged by Cromwell. And like this marriage literally lasted, like I said, 6 months, 7. Shortest marriage out of all of them. The marriage got annulled, and then days later after this, he married Catherine Howard in 1520. Like, she was born in 1524. Again, when he was still married to Catherine of Aragon. Like, Catherine of Aragon was married to Henry for 24 years. That's impressive. Well, they got married in 1540, and in 1542 she died. Execution. Well, she was, when do you know it? Anne of Cleves' lady in waiting. She was just like 17 years old. She was really young. And she was obedient, fertile, chaste. She was like the perfect woman for Henry. But of course, Henry by this point, 1540, he was like 50 years old or something. And of course, imagine you're Catherine and you just find this dude who's like fat, with gout, who's like 50, and you have to marry him and have sex with him to give him an heir. You're not going to want to do that, obviously. So, according to Henry, he made her feel like she made him feel young again, helped him forget the constant pain and his ulcerated legs. He actually really liked her. And she loved the luxury of court. I know. I don't think anyone wouldn't enjoy having luxury of court. She was actually Queen of England, so that wasn't too bad. However, just 14 months into the marriage, there was evidence that Catherine had been cheating on Henry. There was evidence of adultery and infidelity. Now, in Tudor England, when things like these happen, it's bad. Like if a woman, the man can cheat on the woman all he wants, but if a woman were to cheat on a man, it was really bad. It was like betraying the man. However, Henry is king, so by doing that, she's betraying the king. And if you betray the king, that's treason. And so she committed treason and would go on to be executed on the 13th of February, 1542. Then, when she died, Henry still loved her. He was really torn. He was really disappointed and sad that she had done this, because he actually really loved her, and was went into this very deep depression and had no new wife waiting, because he didn't like any of Catherine's ladies in waiting. Then in 1543, he met and married Catherine Parr, who was actually born in 1512, 4 years after Jane Seymour. She was closer to, I think, when I say closer to his age, I mean compared to when it was a few last few years. Catherine was the oldest one, and Anne Boleyn, kind of. But then, in comparison with Catherine Howard or Anne of Cleves, it wasn't that. It's a solid age. She was I think 30 something, when Henry was 50 something. So obviously a huge age difference, but relatively speaking, not too bad. Well, she was born in 1512, like I said, got married in 1543, and died in 1548, a year after Henry. And she actually had a close call, because, she actually had been widowed twice, and with Henry 3 times. It's a curse. Well, she was slim and attractive, although they do paint her to be this maternal figure, really strong and imposing. I don't know, but apparently she was slim and attractive, and actually, captured Henry's eye. And she actually established herself to be a major influence in Henry's life. And fun fact, by 1543, Mary and Elizabeth weren't included in the succession, but she actually managed to convince Henry to do so. So thanks to her, we have Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth. If not, who knows? So in 1546, a year before Henry's death, Catherine was, like I said, so close to dying by beheading. So close. Because there was this, she was Protestant. She was really Protestant. There was evidence she was being heretic. And Henry was kind of turning to Catholicism by the end of his reign, but not really. But still, Catherine knew this because she had been warned in advance. Rushed to her bed and said, "Oh my God, I'm mortally ill. Oh my God." And when Henry came to her side to help her, she explained herself. She was actually really good at it, and ended up convincing him to not kill her. So she actually she was really good at manipulating Henry. But she wasn't at the king's side when he died in 1547. So those are Henry VIII's wives. It's obviously divorced, beheaded, and died. Divorced, beheaded, survived. Rather than divorce, it's actually annulled. But hey, we can excuse it. And definitely Catherine of Aragon was the longest marriage. And it ended because of Anne Boleyn. If Anne Boleyn hadn't been so ambitious, if she had just had sex with him, possibly, I don't know if Catherine would have had another son, because she was getting old. She was born in 1485, and the marriage got annulled in 1533. So that is quite a few years. And Anne Boleyn was young, but then the whole adultery thing, that's why she got executed. Jane Seymour, she was young and perfect for Henry, but she died childbirth. Anne of Cleves, they were really incompatible. She was Protestant, he was Protestant leaning, but not that much. She didn't speak a word of English. She was a horse. So that ended really shortly. And then Catherine Howard, she was really young, but of course, 17-year-old she's already promiscuous. She already had any other relationships, although she didn't disclose them to Henry. That these actually came up as proof when they already got married, and were one of the reasons she got executed. But a 17-year-old, obviously, she's not gonna want to have sex with a 50-year-old man. Obviously not. So that's why she had sex with others her age who had more of her taste. That's why she got executed. And Catherine Parr was almost executed, managed to manipulate her way out, and actually died just a year after Henry did. So the longest living wife, not the longest living, but the one who outlived Henry by far, Anne of Cleves. She was awesome. I really like Anne of Cleves. But yeah, I mean, out of all the wives, the one that had the most significant impact, I think it's Anne Boleyn, because her whole marriage thing was the cause for the Reformation. I mean, yeah, Catherine of Aragon was really significant, but it wasn't the cause of Reformation. It was actually Anne Boleyn. If Anne Boleyn hadn't come to exist or come to court, he would have become infatuated with her. Who knows? Maybe there would be another lady in waiting who would have been manipulating Henry. But who knows? I don't think the Reformation would have reached such extent, because unless it was actually because of Anne Boleyn, the Reformation reached that extent. So yeah, that is pretty much it. Thank you for watching.